Welcome to Horrified Stories, where fear comes to life. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Let's start our today's story. Ghost Stories from the Graveyard, Night of the Restless Spirits. A dare. It all began with a dare. The small, sleepy town of Ravens Hollow was famous for its sprawling graveyard, a resting place so old that even the oldest residents couldn't recall its origins. Locals told stories of strange lights, eerie whispers, and shadows that moved when no one was there. For as long as anyone could remember, the graveyard had been a place of fear and curiosity. On a crisp October night, 5 friends gathered around a campfire at the edge of the graveyard, the flickering flames casting long, dancing shadows. The air was filled with the scent of burning wood and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. "This place gives me the creeps," said Mia, clutching her jacket tightly. "Why are we even here?" "Because it's tradition," replied Ryan, the self-proclaimed leader of the group. "Every year before Halloween, we come here to tell ghost stories. And this year, we're doing something special." "Special?" Emma asked, raising an eyebrow. "What's so special about sitting here freezing our butts off?" Ryan smirked, pulling out an old key from his pocket. Its surface was tarnished, and it looked like it hadn't been used in decades. "Yes," he said, holding it up. "Where did you get that?" asked Jake, leaning closer to examine the key. "I found it in my grandfather's attic," Ryan said. "It opens the caretaker's cottage. You know, the one everyone says is haunted." Mia's eyes widened. "Are you serious? That place has been locked up for years." "Exactly," Ryan said, his grin widening. "And we're going to be the first ones to see what's inside." The caretaker's cottage. The caretaker's cottage Saturday on the far side of the graveyard, hidden behind rows of weathered tombstones and ancient trees. It was a small, crumbling building, its windows boarded up and its roof partially collapsed. As the group approached, the air seemed to grow colder, and an unnatural silence settled over the graveyard. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. "This is a bad idea," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're just scared," Ryan teased, sliding the key into the rusted lock. The door creaked open with an ear-splitting groan, revealing a dark, musty interior. Inside, the cottage was filled with cobwebs and dust. Broken furniture was scattered across the floor, and the walls were lined with shelves of rotting books. An old oil lamp Saturday on a table in the center of the room, its glass cracked but intact. "This place is disgusting," Emma said, wrinkling her nose. Jake picked up the oil lamp, inspecting it closely. "This thing's ancient. Think it still works?" Ryan shrugged. "Only one way to find out." He pulled a lighter from his pocket and lit the lamp. The flame flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the room. As the light illuminated the space, they noticed something odd. The far wall was covered in strange symbols, etched deep into the wood. They looked like a mix of runes and pictograms, their meanings impossible to decipher. "What do you think this is?" Jake asked, running his fingers over the carvings. "Probably some weird caretaker thing," Ryan said dismissively. "Let's keep looking." The locked trunk. In the corner of the room, they found a large trunk, its surface covered in dust and its metal hinges rusted, and an elk beside it, brushing away the dirt. "There's another keyhole," she said. Ryan pulled out the key, but it didn't fit. "Must be a different key," he muttered. Jake examined the trunk more closely, noticing faint scratches along the edges. "Looks like someone tried to break into this." "Why would they lock it in the first place?" Mia asked. "Only one way to find out," Ryan said. "Let's open it." Using a crowbar he had brought, Ryan pried open the trunk. The lid creaked as it gave way, revealing its contents: a bundle of old letters, a journal, and a single photograph. The photograph was black and white, showing a man in his late 40s standing in front of the graveyard gates. His expression was stern, and his eyes seemed to follow them no matter how they turned the photo. "Creepy," Emma said, shuddering. Ryan picked up the journal and flipped it open. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, the ink faded but still legible. "What's it say?" Jake asked. Ryan read aloud. October 13th, 1923. I fear the spirits grow restless. The rituals are no longer enough to keep them contained. Tonight, I will attempt the binding once more, but I am running out of time. If I fail, God help us all. The group exchanged uneasy glances. What kind of rituals? Mia asked. Ryan turned the page, but the rest of the journal was blank. I don't know, he said, but it sounds like he was trying to stop something. The whispering shadows. As they continued to search the cottage, a faint sound began to echo through the room. At first, it was barely audible, like the rustling of leaves, but soon it grew louder, forming a chorus of whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Do you hear that? Emma asked, her voice trembling. It's just the wind, Ryan said, though he didn't sound convinced. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They were speaking words now, though none of them could understand the language. This isn't right, Mia said, backing toward the door. We need to leave. Before anyone could respond, the oil lamp flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. The first sign, in the pitch-black silence, a single word rang out, clear and sharp. Live! The group frowned, their breaths caught in their throats. Who said that? Jake whispered. No one answered. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut, and the room filled with an icy wind. The whispers turned into wails, and the shadows on the walls began to move, twisting and writhing like living things. Run! Ryan shouted, fumbling for the door. The group scrambled out of the cottage, the wind and waves following them. As they ran through the graveyard, they felt something chasing them, unseen but undeniably there. When they finally reached the edge of the graveyard, the wind stopped, and the silence returned. They turned back to see the caretaker's cottage, its windows glowing faintly with an unnatural light. What just happened? Emma asked, her voice shaking. I don't know, Ryan said, clutching the journal tightly, but I think we woke something up. Whispers of the forgotten. The group couldn't shake the feeling that they had disturbed something in the caretaker's cottage. They returned to their homes in uneasy silence, but sleep didn't come easily. Each of them felt the weight of the graveyard pressing on their thoughts, like a shadow that refused to fade. The journal's secrets. The next morning, Ryan called the group to meet at his house. They gathered around the kitchen table, the caretaker's journal and the photograph spread out before them. We need to figure out what this is, Ryan said, tapping the journal. There's something in here that might explain what's happening. Emma crossed her arms, her face pale. What's happening is that we messed with something we shouldn't have. That place wasn't just creepy, it was cursed. Mia nodded in agreement. She's right. Those whispers, they weren't just the wind. Jake leaned forward, flipping through the journal. Look, we're already involved. Running away isn't going to fix this. If something's been disturbed, we need to figure out what it is and how to stop it. Clara, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke. The symbols on the wall, she said, they weren't just random carvings. They were protective. I think the caretaker was trying to keep something contained. Ryan raised an eyebrow. And you know this how? Clara hesitated. I've seen similar symbols before, in books, stories. They used to ward off spirits. The group exchanged uneasy glances. So what do we do? Jake asked. Ryan flipped to the journal's last entry. The caretaker wrote about a ritual, a binding ritual. If the spirits are restless, maybe we need to complete it. And how do we do that? Emma asked. Ryan pointed to the letters they had found in the trunk. We start with these. Letters from the past. The letters were yellowed with age, the handwriting elegant but fading. As the group sifted through them, a story began to emerge. The caretaker, a man named Elias Thorne, had been tasked with maintaining the graveyard and ensuring the spirits within remained at peace. But over time, he began noticing strange occurrences, graves disturbed, shadows moving in the night, and whispers that echoed through the trees. One letter, dated October 15th, 1923, stood out. The spirits grow bolder with each passing night. I fear the barrier is weakening. The ritual must be performed before All Hallows Eve, or the graveyard will no longer be a place of rest. What does that mean? Mia asked, her voice trembling. It means we don't have much time, Ryan said. Jake held up another letter, dated a few days later. I attempted the ritual tonight, but something went wrong. The spirits resisted, their anger shaking the very ground. I barely escaped with my life. If I fell again, the consequences will be dire. The group fell silent, the weight of the words sinking in. Do you think he succeeded? Emma asked quietly. Ryan shook his head. If he had, we wouldn't be dealing with this now. The first signs. That night, the friends went their separate ways, each trying to make sense of what they had read. But the graveyard wasn't done with them yet. Mia was the first to notice the strange occurrences. As she sat in her bedroom, the air around her grew cold, and a faint whisper tickled her ear. Mia! She spun around, but no one was there. The whisper came again, louder this time, accompanied by a shadow that flickered across her wall. Mia, help us! Terrified, she grabbed her phone and called Emma. Something's happening, she said, her voice shaking. I think they followed us. Emma, who had been hearing faint knocks at her window all evening, didn't need convincing. We need to talk to the others, she said. By midnight, the group was gathered in Ryan's garage, their faces pale and drawn. They're haunting us, Mia said. I heard whispers in my room. And I saw shadows, Emma added. Jake nodded grimly. I saw something too, a figure at the end of my street. When I looked again, it was gone. They're getting stronger, Clara said. If we don't do something soon, it's only going to get worse. Ryan pulled out the journal again, flipping to a page near the middle. The ritual, he said. We have to finish what Elias started. Returning to the graveyard, the next night, armed with flashlights, candles, and that journal, the group returned to the graveyard. The air was thick with tension as they made their way to the caretaker's cottage. Its crumbling walls illuminated by the moonlight. Inside, the atmosphere was even more oppressive. The whispers had returned, louder and more insistent, and the symbols on the walls seemed to pulse faintly. Clara set the journal on the table, her hands shaking. The ritual needs specific items, she said. Salt, candles, and something personal from each of us. It's supposed to create a bond strong enough to contain the spirits. The group quickly gathered the items, placing them in a circle on the floor. Ryan lit the candles, their flames flickering in the cold, still air. Now what? Jake asked. Clara read from the journal. Speak the names of the spirits, and call them to the circle. Offer your bond as a seal, and command them to rest. How do we know their names? Mia asked. We don't, Clara admitted, but maybe we just call them as one. The group joined hands. Standing in the circle of light, Clara began to chant, her voice trembling but steady. Spirits of the restless, we call you, come forth and hear our plea. Accept this offering and find peace. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the temperature plummeted, and the candles flickered violently. The whispers rose to a deafening chorus, and shadows swirled around the room. They're here, Emma said, her voice barely audible over the noise. The warning, as the shadows converged, a figure began to take shape in the center of the circle. It was translucent, its features shifting and indistinct, but its eyes burned with an unnatural light. You dare summon us, the figure hissed, its voice echoing unnaturally. We're trying to help, Clara said, her voice shaking. We just want to put you to rest. The figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. Rest? There is no rest for the forgotten. You cannot undo what has been done. What do you want from us? Ryan demanded. The figure turned its burning gaze on him. The graveyard's curse cannot be broken, but it can be passed. One of you must stay. One of you must become its keeper. The group exchanged terrified glances. Choose, the figure said, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves, or face the wrath of the restless. The keeper's curse. The group stood frowning in the caretaker's cottage, the spirit's fiery eyes burning into their souls. It's words hung in the cold, suffocating air. One of you must stay. One of you must become its keeper. What does that even mean? Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. It means one of us has to stay in the graveyard forever, Mia said, her face pale. The spirit's translucent form shifted, its hollow voice filling the room. The graveyard is bound by the souls of the forgotten. They demand balance. Without a keeper, the barrier weakens, and they will escape. Choose, or we shall choose for you. A desperate argument. No way, Jake said, stepping back. This is insane. We're not sacrificing anyone. Do you think it cares what we want? Clara shot back. We're out of options. Ryan clenched his fists. There has to be another way. The journal, maybe there's something we missed. You don't understand. The spirit hissed. The keeper is the tether. Without one, the dead will roam freely. This is not a choice. It is a law. Why us? Mia cried. We didn't do anything. The spirit turned its gaze to her. You disturbed the slumber of the forgotten. You opened the door. Now, you must pay the price. The room grew colder, the whispers rising once more. Shadows flickered along the walls, and the symbols carved into the wood began to glow faintly. We don't have much time, Clara said, her voice trembling. If we don't decide, they'll decide for us. A grim revelation. Ryan grabbed the journal, frantically flipping through the pages. There has to be something, anything. His eyes landed on a passage he hadn't noticed before, written in a different, shakier handwriting. The curse of the keeper is eternal. To guard the barrier is to forfeit one's life. To stand between the living and the dead, the keeper must sacrifice their freedom to ensure the safety of all. Ryan's voice caught as he read aloud. Whoever becomes the keeper, they're trapped here, forever. Mia shook her head violently. No, no way. There has to be another way. Emma's hands were trembling. We can't just let them kick one of us. That's not fair. Clara took a deep breath, her gaze steady. Maybe it doesn't have to be forever. If we can figure out how to strengthen the barrier, maybe the keeper can be freed later. And if we can't, Jake asked, his voice low, then one of us is stuck here, Clara said. The spirit's test. The spirit's fiery gaze swept over the group. You hesitate. You bicker. This is why you mortals are weak. We shall decide for you. The room darkened, and the shadows began to move, reaching out like tendrils toward the group. Each of them felt an icy grip on their chest, their breaths coming in short gasps. Prove your worth, the spirit commanded. Reveal your courage, your strength. Only the worthy shall remain. Without warning, the ground beneath them shifted, and the cottage seemed to dissolve into darkness. Each of them was separated, their surroundings replaced by eerie, fog-covered landscapes. Mia's trial. Mia found herself standing in a graveyard that seemed endless, the tombstones stretching into the mist. A faint sobbing sound echoed around her, growing louder with each step she took. Hello, she called, her voice trembling. Jake's trial. Jake stood in a forest. The trees gnarled and twisted. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. But when he turned, no one was there. Who's there? He shouted, his voice echoing. A shadowy figure emerged from the trees, its form shifting and indistinct. You abandoned us, it said in a voice that sounded eerily familiar. Jake stepped back. What are you talking about? The figure moved closer, its face becoming clearer. It was his older brother, who had died years ago in a car accident. You left me, the figure said, its voice full of accusation. Why didn't you save me? Tears streamed down Jake's face. I couldn't. I tried. The figure's expression darkened. You didn't try hard enough. Clara's trial. Clara found herself in a small room with a single mirror on the wall. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was wrong. The reflection's eyes glowed faintly, and his smile was too wide. Why are you here? The reflection asked, its voice distorted. Clara stepped back. This isn't real. The reflection laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally. Real or not, you brought this upon yourself. You meddled with forces you don't understand. I was trying to help, Clara said firmly. Help, the reflection sneered. Or were you looking for answers? You've always been too curious, too stubborn. That's why you're here. The reflection reached out of the mirror, its hand stretching toward Clara. Emma and Ryan. Emma and Ryan found themselves back in the graveyard, standing together but surrounded by thick fog. The whispers grew louder, forming words that seemed to come from all directions. Why did you disturb our rest? The voices demanded. Ryan stepped forward. We didn't mean to. We just wanted to know the truth. There is no truth, the voices hissed, only suffering. The ground began to shake, and dark figures emerged from the fog, their forms barely human. We must choose, the voices said. Prove your worth, or face eternity with us. A choice. One by one, the friends were pulled back into the caretaker's cottage. They were shaken, their faces pale and their breaths ragged. The spirit's form loomed over them, its fiery gaze unrelenting. You have faced your trials. Now the choice is clear. The group looked at one another, fear and determination in their eyes. What's the choice? Jake asked. The spirit's voice was cold and final. Who will stay, and who will leave? Sacrifice in the shadows. The cold silence following the spirit's demand pressed down on the group. The weight of the choice hung in the air like a shroud, suffocating and unrelenting. Who will stay, and who will leave? No one spoke at first. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows on their faces, each of them pale with fear and uncertainty. Is this even a choice? Mia finally asked, her voice trembling. None of us want to stay, but if we don't, they'll choose for us. Clara finished grimly. Jake clenched his fists. There's got to be another way. We can't just sacrifice someone. Clara shook her head. This isn't about what we want. It's about what's necessary. If no one stays, the spirits will escape, and who knows what they'll do. We're just kids, Emma said, her voice breaking. Why is this happening to us? Ryan stepped forward, his jaw tight. We don't have time to argue. If we don't decide now, the spirits will decide, and I don't think they'll be fair about it. The final plea. The spirit's form began to grow more solid, its fiery gaze sweeping over the group. Your time is running out. It hissed. Choose, or face the wrath of the forgotten. Clara took a shaky breath. If we choose someone, does that mean the rest of us can leave safely? The spirit's hollow voice echoed in the small room. The sacrifice will restore the balance. The rest shall go free. That's not freedom, Mia said bitterly, tears streaming down her face. Not if we have to live with this for the rest of our lives. Emma wiped her eyes and looked at Ryan. There has to be something else in the journal. Did the caretaker say anything about reversing this? Ryan flipped through the journal desperately, his hands shaking. Finally, he stopped on a passage near the middle. The keeper must bind the spirits, offering their essence as a seal. This is the only way to prevent their escape. But the curse is not unbreakable. If the source of the unrest is destroyed, the spirits will be released from their torment. The source of the unrest, Ryan said aloud. If we can destroy it, maybe we can end this without anyone staying behind. What does that even mean? Jake asked. A source, Clara said, her eyes widening. The spirits weren't restless until the caretaker's ritual failed. Something happened that night, something that broke the barrier. If we can figure out what it was and fix it. We don't have time to figure that out, Emma said, her voice rising. The spirits aren't going to wait for us to solve a mystery. A risky decision. The spirit loomed closer, its form shifting and flickering. Your hesitation grows tiresome. Choose now, or all of you shall remain. Ryan stepped forward, his expression resolute. I'll do it. The others stared at him in shock. No, Clara said. You don't have to. Someone has to. Ryan interrupted, and we don't have time to argue about it. If this is the only way to keep everyone else safe, then I'll stay. Jake grabbed Ryan's arm. This isn't your responsibility. We should all be in this together. Ryan pulled away, his voice firm. I've made my choice. The spirit's gaze locked onto him. You are willing to take the burden. Ryan nodded. Yes, I'll be the keeper. The spirit raised a hand, his fiery eyes glowing brighter. The bond shall be sealed. The binding ritual. The air grew colder as the spirit began to chant in a language none of them recognized. Shadows swirled around Ryan, and the candles flickered violently. Clara stepped forward suddenly. Wait, if he's going to do this, he needs to know what he's agreeing to. What happens to the keeper? The spirit paused, its hollow gaze turning to her. The keeper becomes the tether. They are bound to the graveyard, their life forfeit to the barrier. They will walk the earth but never leave this place. They will age but never die. They will endure eternity. Alone. Emma gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Ryan, you can't. I've already decided. Ryan sat firmly. It turned to the spirit. Do it. The spirit raised its hands again, the shadows closing in around Ryan. The symbols on the walls began to glow, and a low hum filled the room. Ryan's body stiffened as the shadows engulfed him, his eyes glowing faintly. He gasped, then fell to his knees as the room grew silent once more. The spirit's form flickered, its gaze sweeping over the others. The balance has been restored. You are free to leave. The escape. The group hesitated, their eyes fixed on Ryan, who was still kneeling on the floor. He looked up at them, his face pale but calm. Go, he said softly. We can't just leave you here, Clara said, tears streaming down her face. You have to, Ryan said. If you stay, it'll all be for nothing. Jake clenched his fists, his jaw tight. We'll come back for you. We'll figure out how to break the curse. Ryan gave him a faint smile. I know you will. The group slowly backed away, their hearts heavy. As they stepped outside, the air felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the graveyard lifting, but the knowledge of what they had left behind pressed down on them like a shadow. The keeper's vigil. Ryan stood alone in the caretaker's cottage, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shadows on the walls. He felt the weight of the graveyard settle over him, a constant, suffocating presence. The spirit appeared before him, its form more solid now. You have taken the burden willingly. The graveyard is safe. For now. Ryan looked at the spirit, his expression hard. What happens if the barrier fails again? The spirit's gaze burned into him. You must ensure it does not. That is your purpose now. Ryan nodded, a sense of calm determination washing over him. Then I'll do whatever it takes. As the spirit faded, Ryan turned to look out the window. The graveyard stretched before him, silent and still. He was alone, but his resolve was unshaken. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of whispers began to rise. Breaking the curse. The group had left the graveyard, but it had not left them. The oppressive weight of guilt and loss hung heavy in the air as they trudged through the misty forest, each of them haunted by the memory of Ryan's sacrifice. We can't just leave him, Clara said, her voice breaking the tense silence. We won't, Jake replied firmly. We'll figure out how to break the curse and get him out of there. Emma glanced nervously over her shoulder. But what if the spirits won't let us? They might not give him back, even if we fix the barrier. That's a risk we have to take, Clara said. He didn't give up on us. We can't give up on him. Mia, who had been silent, finally spoke. That journal. It said the source of the unrest had to be destroyed. That's the only way to free him and end this for good. Jake pulled the journal from his backpack, flipping through its brittle pages. Then we figure out what that source is and fast. Unraveling the mystery. Back at Clara's house, the group pored over the journal, searching for clues. It's got to be tied to the caretaker, Mia said, pointing to a faded section of the journal. He was the one who kept the barrier intact. Whatever went wrong, it started with him. Jake frowned. But he's dead. How are we supposed to figure out what happened? Emma tapped a finger on the page. What about this? She said, reading aloud. The artifact holds the key. Without it, the barrier weakens, and the restless rise. The artifact, Clara repeated. What do you think it is? It's got to be something in the graveyard, Jake said. Something the caretaker used to maintain the barrier. But the graveyard's huge, Emma pointed out. It could take days to find it. Clara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Not if we know where to look. The caretaker's house. That's where he performed the rituals. If the artifact is anywhere, It's there. The return. Despite their fear, the group knew what they had to do. Armed with flashlights and determination, they made their way back to the graveyard. The air grew colder as they approached, the weight of the place pressing down on them once more. The wrought iron gate creaked open, and the faint sound of whispers greeted them like old ghosts. "Stay close," Jake said, his voice tense. The caretaker's cottage loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. Inside, Ryan stood at the window, watching their approach. "It came back," he murmured to himself. The spirit appeared beside him, its fiery gaze fixed on the group. "They seek to undo what has been done." Ryan turned to the spirit, his expression hard. "If they can't fix this, let them. You've got what you wanted, Keeper. Isn't that enough?" The spirit's form flickered. "The balance is delicate. If they disturb it further, all will be lost." Ryan clenched his fists. "Then help them, or leave them alone." The spirit said nothing, its form dissolving into the shadows. The artifact. Inside the cottage, the group quickly began searching for clues. Dust-covered shelves lined the walls, filled with strange objects and books written in languages they couldn't understand. "Look for anything that stands out," Clara said, her voice low. Mia opened a drawer and pulled out a small, ornate box. "What's this?" The others gathered around as she opened it, revealing a dark crystal that seemed to pulse faintly with light. "That has to be it," Jake said, reaching for it. As soon as his fingers touched the crystal, the room grew colder, and the whispers rose into a deafening roar. Shadows began to swirl around them, forming into figures with glowing eyes. "You should not have returned," a voice hissed. The spirit appeared, its fiery gaze burning into them. "The artifact is the heart of the barrier. Remove it, and the restless will rise. Leave now, or face their wrath." "We're not leaving without Ryan," Clara said firmly. The spirit's form flickered, and the shadows began to close in. "Then you leave me no choice." A battle of wills. The group scrambled as the shadows lunged toward them. Jake swung his flashlight wildly, the beam cutting through the darkness, but doing little to stop the advancing figures. Mia clutched the crystal, her hands trembling. "What do we do?" "We have to destroy it," Clara said, her voice shaking. "But if we destroy it, won't the barrier collapse?" Emma asked. "Not if we find a way to strengthen it first," Clara shouted. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "The barrier can't hold without the artifact. But if you destroy it, you release the spirits and me." The group turned to him, shocked. "What are you saying?" Jake asked. Ryan stepped closer. "If you destroy the artifact, I'll be free, but so will the restless. You'll have to seal them another way." "Another way?" Mia asked desperately. "Ah." Ryan glanced at the journal. The caretaker's writings mentioned a purification ritual. "If you can purify the ground, you might be able to seal the spirits without the artifact." "The final ritual." Clara grabbed the journal and quickly found the instructions for the ritual. "We need salt, fire, and something to bind the spirits, a personal item or token." Jake pulled a lighter from his pocket. "We've got fire." Mia grabbed a pouch of salt from her bag. "And salt." Emma hesitated, then took off her necklace, a small locket her grandmother had given her. "This should work as a token." They moved to the center of the graveyard, where the spirits swirled angrily. The whispers grew louder, the shadows circling them like predators. Clara stood in the center, holding the journal, ready. The others nodded, their fear replaced by determination. Clara began to chant the words, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Jake poured salt in a circle around them, while Mia lit a small fire in the center. Emma held the locket tightly, her eyes closed as she whispered a prayer. The spirits screamed, their forms dissolving into the air. The ground trembled, and the graveyard was filled with a blinding light. Freedom. When the light faded, the graveyard was silent. The oppressive weight was gone, replaced by a sense of peace. Ryan stood in the middle of the group, no longer bound by the shadows. He looked at them, his expression a mix of relief and gratitude. "You did it." Emma hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "We couldn't leave you behind." The group stood together, The nightmare finally over. As they left the graveyard for the last time, the gate creaked shut behind them. The spirits finally at rest. They knew they would never forget what had happened, but they also knew they had done the right thing. And somewhere in the distance, the first rays of dawn broke through the mist, lighting their way home. If you like this story, don't forget to hit the like button, share and subscribe the channel. Help us grow. Thanks for watching.